Welcome to my session and the first session of OCX. So welcome to OCX and the Java community at OCX. I'm Hendrik, I'm from Germany, and yeah, within Eclipse, I work mostly at Adoptium, did some things in the Jakarta ecosystem too, but focus is on Adoptium. And I'm one of the board members of the Eclipse Foundation. And this talk will be all about Java at Eclipse, what Java projects we have in Eclipse, what the Java focus as Eclipse, and so on. And before we start, I need to tell you, I write code with IntelliJ. From time to time, I use the Microsoft OpenJDK or the Microsoft builds of OpenJDK to run Java. And I often use Spring Boot to create applications. And you might think, now what? He's using IntelliJ instead of the Eclipse IDE. He's using the Microsoft builds of OpenJDK instead of Adoptium, or Tamarind, to be fair. He's using Spring Boot instead of Jakarta EE or Microprofile. How can that guy talk about Eclipse, right? Yeah, we will see. So what I have with me for today is I would like to talk about the Eclipse platform and IDE, Jakarta EE, Microprofile, Adoptium, and then a little bit about the Eclipse Foundation in general, and hopefully at the end we understand how all that is related to Spring, IntelliJ, Microsoft builds of OpenJDK, and so on. So let's start with the first project that is related to Java, the Eclipse project. So the Eclipse project is a top-level project that contains the Eclipse platform and the Eclipse JDT and many more. Clear, isn't it? So that is the description, and when I seen that, it was like, okay, I have no idea what that means actually. What is a top-level project? What is the Eclipse platform? What is Eclipse JDT? I was thinking we're talking about an IDE. And to understand that sentence and all that, we should do, going back in time and see how all started. And before we do that, I would like to start with a quote from Mike, the executive director of the Eclipse Foundation, who said, "Java has been at the core of the Eclipse Foundation project since its inception. And of course, the Eclipse Java IDE is used by millions of developers around the world." And I would like to focus, first of all, on the first sentence. And let's start with a history lesson. So we start in 1997, where Eclipse released a project that has been called Visual H for Java. Whoever worked with Visual H for Java? Whoa, 2 people in the room, awesome. I have not done that. So, and this project has been alive since 2001 when version 4.0 was released. To get you into this kind of software, what I found online is like, oh yeah, it costs $99, and it came with 3 CDs for Windows 32 and OS2. So that was like the area we're talking about, right? So quite odd. I have some pictures actually, how it looks. So this is how this project looks like. And if you aware of the Eclipse IDE and especially used it since several years, that looks kind of similar, right? This is because in 2001, IBM open sourced that project under the name Eclipse. And that then looks like this. So those are screenshots from the first Eclipse IDE, actually. Yeah, and I mean, if you use Eclipse IDE today, some things are still familiar, right? So open source was quite new at that time. So what IBM does to create a good open source project, they define some stewards. And at the beginning, there were 9 stewards, so companies that worked together on the Eclipse IDE. And you can see what kind of success the Eclipse IDE was when you look at the second number, that 2 years later, the number of stewards has increased to over 80 companies interested in it, working on it. And based on that success, 1 year later, the Eclipse Foundation has been created. So in 2004, the Eclipse Foundation has been founded around the IDE. There was only the IDE, and the Eclipse Foundation was founded as a steward for the Eclipse community, for the community of the IDE, to create vendor-neutral, open, and transparent software. And it was a non-profit organization from the start, right? So, coming back to the IDE, since the beginning, the IDE was modular framework. So it was not like one big project, it was from the beginning based on modules. And I think that is one of the points that made it that famous, especially in those times. So this modular framework is what we today call the Eclipse platform, actually. And the Eclipse platform forms with some other projects the so-called Eclipse project, which is a top-level project of all of that. And next to the Eclipse platform, the second most important project here is Eclipse JDT, which stands for Java Development Tools, which includes everything that you need for within the Eclipse IDE work with Java. So you can take the platform, keep JDT away, and put something else in it, and then you maybe have a C++ or whatever IDE you want to. So that's the idea of the Eclipse project, and it's working since today. Actually, the last years it has even grown again. So, because I think 1.5, 2 years ago, actually I don't know it exactly, a new working group has formed around all that, the Eclipse IDE working group, to move the work on the Eclipse IDE and the whole ecosystem about it forward. And as you can see, there are several companies, even big ones, Bosch, we have Bosch here, we have SAP here, Vector here, VMware, that work on the future of the IDE and that move the IDE forward. And why people often say, oh yeah, you cannot use Eclipse, you know, it's still used a lot. So I've just looked at some download statistics. Here we see like a version from last year that is downloaded like 4 million times. The latest version, I mean, that is actually not even a month old, has been already downloaded nearly 1 million times. And that is only the installer, right? Often people don't use the installer. Often people download packages directly, and they have, so for example, the Eclipse IDE package has already over 100,000 downloads. So it's really a lot of downloads. And when talking about things that happen and the future of the IDE, some interesting parts that I know from the team that I can tell you is that what they did the last year is they had a phase of prototyping, and they created several prototypes regarding the new UI and UX of the Eclipse IDE. So to really create a totally fresh look with a new graphics toolkit, there are several ideas. SVT, Swing, Skia, who knows Skia? So Skia is a UI toolkit that is, for example, used for Chrome, to render Chrome and all the Android stuff and things like that. So it's a generic toolkit that is widely used. JetBrains created a Java wrapper around it. It's called Skia, but instead of an I, there's a J. And Eclipse is playing with that and checking if that can be used to create a new rich IDE of Eclipse. There's even a presentation here. Sadly, that is really parallel to this one. So I would like to see that, but yeah, we cannot because we're here in the room. So if you are more interested in that, you need to run. Another thing they are working on is all this language server support, right? So I'm not deep into that. I know several language servers already work within the Eclipse IDE. The Java one, based on how JDT is working, is still not integrated, but they're working on it. As said, the last 2 years, a lot of things happened. and there's really like a new community established with new community managers, mentors, and so on. I just put a picture here. I've already seen several people here. I've seen Thomas Foment, I've seen Ed Marks here. So if you are interested in that topic, talk to that people because they know way, way, way more about the Eclipse project and the IDE that I know. Yeah, that's about the Eclipse IDE. Our next topic I would like to talk about is microprofile. And as you see, I need to rush a little bit through these topics because we really have a lot of Java-related projects within the Eclipse Foundation. So, when talking about microprofile, again, I will start with some history. Not going back that much in time, I will start in 2016. And in 2016, Java EE was still the thing. Actually, it wasn't the thing because it was quite old, not moving forward. Yeah, so when looking, for example, at the releases of Java EE, it took multiple years from one to another release, right? And that in a time where we create microservices, where IT reinvents itself overnight, actually. So that was totally horrible. And with that in mind, an idea started, actually it started around Java 1, that year, that was to create something faster, something smaller, that better integrates all the things together and can move forward faster. And that was like the birth of microprofile. Actually, it didn't start as an Eclipse project, so it was not like, oh, we want to do that and we do it with Eclipse. It all started just in Google Groups as discussions, and there were several discussions in 2016 about that, like where should we host the project, how should it be named, what should be the submodules or the spec that we want to have in microprofile, and so on and so on. I've just put some of the screenshots of the discussions here. You don't need to read that. This one is interesting. Oh, let me see. That is from 2017, because this is where it was official that microprofile will move to the Eclipse Foundation and will become a part of the Eclipse Foundation. And a working group of the Eclipse Foundation. And as for the IDE, we have our own working group for microprofile within the Eclipse Foundation. Here you see the companies that are part of this working group that work on microprofile and spend resources, money for being part of the working group, and people to work on the specs within the Eclipse Foundation. And that is nice because here you see the diversity of partners the Eclipse Foundation work with. You have all these big names, Red Hat, IBM, Microsoft. Then you have companies that are really more specialized in one area, like, for example, Payara or TomTribe, that are really specialized in this Java, Jakarta, EE, so Java Enterprise topic. And then you have even communities like the Garden State Java User Group or the IJAC, which is like the group of all German Java user groups. And I mean, we've seen how long it took for Java EE to create releases. Here you see the same for microprofile, right? So especially at the beginning, they did like multiple releases each year. Actually, that was not so much like new features, new features, new features, but to get in a mood where we can say, okay, we now know how we want to do it, we now know our specs, we now have a solid base to move forward. And that you can see in the bottom, right? Then it's more like, oh yeah, we do like one release each year with a, yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Totally agree. And what you said, I think the important word is spec, right? Because we're not talking here about new releases for Tommy or Payara or something like that. We talk here about really new releases of the specification. And having a release each year for a specification, I would say that's a success. Here you just see, all the different parts that are in the latest version of microprofile that has been released, I think, 3 months ago or something like that. Some have been updated, REST, OpenAPI, telemetry, and fault tolerance. And some 4.7 has not been updated, like the core profile, which is coming from Jakarta, the health API, JWT, and the config API. But some of them has been updated in the 6 or 6.1 release. To use it, super easy. There's just one dependency. You can put in Maven, you can put in Gradle, wherever you want it. And then you can deploy your application on a certified microprofile server. Microprofile even has this starter page that you can use to create a new project. That is super easy. You go on the page, type in the information, and it creates a project for you that you can download and then start working with it. Okay, let's go to the big brother of microprofile, which is Jakarta EE. So in general, it has the same history, right? So Java EE was, some say moving slowly. I would say didn't move at all, like in 2016. So, and with the success of microprofile, what happened is that 1 year later, in 2017, Oracle announced that they will submit everything belongs to Java EE to the Eclipse Foundation. And that is what we now know as Jakarta EE, because that is what was Java EE in the past, has been moved to Jakarta EE. And the sources of Jakarta EE now open source at the Eclipse Foundation. And one funny thing that people often do not know is, and for me it shows how open and transparent and community-centric the Eclipse Foundation is. Who knows where this logo is coming from? Any idea? So the funny story about that logo is that it was not Eclipse saying, oh, we hire a designer and that designer does a logo and we're done. No. So the Eclipse asked the community to submit ideas of logos. And a lot of logos has been submitted, and then there was an election, an open election within the community what the logo should be. I have some of the possible other logos that have been submitted, right? So Jakarta EE could be an ape. That was submitted by the community on, what is it, Hawk? I don't know. So totally different logos. They all look professional, right? Because that is nice. And that shows contribution is not only done by coders, open source contribution can even be done by other people, it's like in this case, by designers, right? So if you're a designer, how cool would it be to say like, oh yeah, I've created this logo that go to 245, it's there all around. That's quite nice. And again, moving forward, here we can see the releases of Jakarta EE. So one release each year after the transition. At the beginning of the transition, to be fair, there was 1 year without a release because all the code need to be moved, everything need to be checked, infrastructure need to be created, and so on and so on. But once that was done, releases started with 8, 9, 9.1, and 10, mostly each year. Currently, we're a little bit out of it, but I heard Jakarta 11 is mostly here. So that work took a little bit longer, but it has some cool features I will show you in a second. The good things are next to having more releases, several other things has changed with the transition from Oracle to the Eclipse Foundation. From my point of view, the most important one is the second one, which is open documentation and TCKs. So TCK stands for Test Compatibility Kit, which means since everything in Java, Jakarta EE is a specification, if you create an application server or something that is based on that specification, there must be a way to check if that really fulfills the specification. And that is what the TCK does, the test compatibility kit. It checks if what you are doing is compatible or fits to the specification. And why I'm talking about that is, under Eclipse, it's open. Under Oracle, it was not. So while the specification was open, yeah, and it must be open because otherwise it's not a specification that somebody can use if it's not open. The TCKs were not. And Oracle was able to say, oh, you want to create an application server and want to have it certified. Oh, yeah, give me some money, you know. And here, everything is open. Everybody can use it. Everybody can run the TCK tests whenever you want to. Actually, when we come to Adoptium, we will see here that we eat our own dog food and run some of those tests to test Adoptium stuff, which is absolutely great. Another thing that happened is the namespace shift. So in Java EE, everything was under the Java X package, Java X dot, I don't know, JPA dot entity, for example. And while Oracle said, oh yeah, we move everything to Eclipse, once that was done, they said, oh yeah, but you're not allowed to use this Java X namespace. So in more detail, it was like, it can stay there, but you're not allowed to add anything to it or mutate anything that is under the Java X namespace. So if you want to have a specification that evolves, and that was exactly the idea with moving it to Eclipse, right? That don't make sense at all. So what happened with Jakarta EE9, everything moved from the Java X namespace to the Jakarta namespace. So it's now jakarta.jpa.entity. That created a little bit of confusion, a little bit of additional work for projects. I know a lot of projects that, because on that, are still on Java EE8. But to be fair, if you do the transition, it's not that hard, right? You need to know your dependencies. Maybe you need to restructure, reorganize your dependencies. But if you have that problem, you should do it at all, independent of this namespace change. So whoever is still on Jakarta EE8, go forward. It's the best you can do, and it makes absolutely sense. And I mean, application servers will in future stop supporting Jakarta EE8, right? And that is the future. So the scope of Jakarta EE is bigger than microprofile, as is the working group. Here you see all the different members of the working group, a lot of companies we've seen before. And here's one really great thing, where the Eclipse Foundation, again, does something quite new. So we have the Apache Foundation here in it, right? So the Eclipse Foundation has, in a project, another open source foundation as a member. How great is that? That is a little bit like eat your own dog food, right? Because as an open source foundation, you want to have companies, entities work together to create a product, a vendor-neutral product. And here we even see the next stage, the next level, which is having foundations work together to create something. It's not the only one where Eclipse does it. If we go into the sector of security, supply chain security, we have the org working group. I always miss where OCR stands for, so I just, or ORC stands for, so I just call it org working group. It's about the CIA, and everything that will happen in Europe regarding software security. And that is really a foundation where, I don't know, like 10 other foundations, the Rust Foundation, PHP Foundation, the Python Foundation, the Apache Foundation, no clue who else, work together to create best practices and specifications regarding software security for the future. Sadly, one foundation is missing exactly in that one. That is the Linux Foundation. Linux Foundation, if you hear that, you should join. That's quite important. Coming back to Jakarta EE, we've seen it for microprofile. For Jakarta E, it's mostly the same, but way more modules that contains individual specifications like JPA, CDI, concurrency, JSON processing, and so on, and so on, and so on. So, as said, Jakarta EE11 is still not there, but when it comes with a lot of new stuff. There's a great blog post from, I always don't know how to pronounce that name. Tanya, how to pronounce that? Do you? Rukman? Is it Rukman? Okay, from Rukman, and he gives an introduction about all the new stuff. And it starts with like, oh, use records, like Java records in your persistence layer. Use virtual threads for concurrency. All that stuff is, use the module system, right? So so I'm a big fan of the module system. I'm currently working in a project where we do everything with the module system that helps us a lot when it comes to encapsulation, to security, and so on. And why Spring, for example, don't do it, actually, based on the legacy, they cannot really do it. Jakarta really takes care of it and working to be, like compatible with the Java module system, and that is absolutely great. So if you want to know more about Jakarta, that's the perfect blog post to have a look. And he's even here. So the writer of that blog post is here. It has a session here at OCX, so you should connect with him. Last but not least, Adoptium. As I said at the beginning, the project where, like, from all those projects I most connected with. And Adoptium is a project that, from my point of view, arrived at the perfect moment in time. Because it arrived at a moment when people were afraid of the future of Java. It was like, oh, Oracle changed the support options. Java, you need to pay now if you want to use Java in production. And there's this new release train. I have no idea how that works. And Oracle does a horrible job when it comes to press and to teach developers on all that. Oracle is great when it comes to developing the OpenJDK. Oracle is horrible when it is about teaching developers. And so I just posted here a German article from that time, from 2018, that asked, do you need to pay for Java in the future? And that is exactly the time when Adoptium was around the corner, which is a successor of Adopt OpenJDK, that was a community effort started by the Java user group London to create custom or create vendor-neutral binaries, Java distribution binaries, out of the OpenJDK. And this has become a working group within the Eclipse Foundation. And here you can see the different members of that working group. Again, several companies, well known. And the most important product of that working group, actually, is Tamarin. So Tamarin is the vendor-neutral build, the vendor-neutral distribution of the Java runtime that is created by Eclipse, especially by the Adoptium working group. So who's using Tamarin? Perfect. So who never heard about Tamarin? Perfect. Very good. So that is like the Java binary that has LTS, so we provide release after release updates for non-cost. We provide it on our servers for download. I will give some info about that in a minute, and especially about the quality of Tamarin. First, we need to speak about the name. So the project before was named Adopt OpenJDK. That was a great name, because the name already described what it's about, right? And when you move a project to the Eclipse Foundation, especially when you have working groups or products, the Eclipse Foundation will trademark all that. So it will trademark names, it will trademark logos, and so on. And that makes sense, actually. So we had the problem that we had adopt OpenJDK as a name from a community, and we wanted to move to the Eclipse Foundation. And in adopt OpenJDK is this word OpenJDK. And the word OpenJDK is trademarked by Oracle. And coming from this, this JavaX namespace, maybe we need to talk about that, and you need to change something Eclipse Foundation. And on the other hand, Oracle, who said, there's now this new runtime, but we want to make money with our runtime, we don't like this that much. So we had some problems with the name, and we needed to find new names. And we did, it took quite long to even get to Adoptium, actually. And then we had the name Adoptium, which is quite near to Adopt OpenJDK. It's a nice looking name. And then we said, is that the name of the working group, of the binaries, of both? And I know that I especially said, I think it's wrong to name both like that, because maybe the working group will have more products next to the binaries, and you never want to name your company with the name of the first product, because you never know what happens. So we needed a new name for our runtime, and we came up with Tamarin. And why it's weird at the beginning, it's the best name a Java runtime can have at all. And actually, I will show you why. So, first of all, that, right? It's an anagram for runtime, which is nice. But tamarin is a chemical element that is the nearest one to coffee, right? So, and what is Java? Java is all about coffee. So, we have an anagram to runtime that is chemically more or less coffee. How good is that as a name for a Java distribution? Okay, so several people did the hands up when I asked, who's using Tamarin? So I will give you a clue, you're not the only one who's using it, right? So I did this talk already last year at EclipseCon. I mean, I heavily updated it, so it's not more or less the same. But last year at EclipseCon, I checked the download count of the Tamarin binaries. Actually, last year we had, holy moly, 244 million of downloads. That was, more or less 1 year ago, right? So I checked it again yesterday evening in the hotel. And it's grown like that. So over 500 million downloads, and look at what happened within 1 year, right? So it's growing like hell. And how you can get it, actually you can just go to our Adoptium page to get it. And there you can not only download our binaries, you can even download binaries of our other distributors, like, for example, Red Hat, Microsoft, Azure, IBM, Huawei, or Alibaba, because all that use binaries or produce binaries based on the OpenJDK that fulfill the quality criteria we within the Adoptium working group has defined. And there are two important quality marks. First of all is each and every binary needs to fulfill the TCK for the OpenJDK. So as we've seen for Jakarta EE, the TCKs, there's another one for the OpenJDK. Sadly, that still is owned by Oracle. What does it mean? It's not open source. So I cannot tell you anything about that. But where I can tell you a lot about is the second quality mark that we have, which is Aquavit. So Aquavit is, I would say, the second big project that is created within the Adoptium working group. And that's a test framework and toolkit to test Java distribution, to test builds that are created out of the OpenJDK. And it contains a lot of tests. It contains tests coming from the OpenJDK. It contains functional tests, system tests. And one funny thing is those external tests, because those external tests, that's kind of hack, where we just take other projects and run their unit tests and integration tests with a binary we want to test. And The TCKs I mentioned earlier that are now open source are tests that we execute with our binaries to see that our binaries behave and perform like you want to have them in production. And with all of that coming together, the good thing is that with Adoptium we have a full open build chain. So starting from the OpenJDK, which is open source, with our installers that have their own repository at GitHub, over our build, which is an own repository, our CI infrastructure, like the Jenkins, it's open source. You can look at it, you can check it. Aquavit that we use for certification is open source. There's even a front end where you can see the results. The only thing that sadly happens behind closed doors is the Java TCK that is closed source by Oracle. Even our binaries are downloadable actually at GitHub. So that is as open as it could be. And with that project, one thing is super important for us, which is security, especially supply chain security. And I will just give a sneak peek about that topic because I have a person sitting here in the front who has like 3 sessions at OCX about the security and the things we did at Adoptium to make this project as safe and secure as possible. When talking about supply chain security, you have a lot of attack sectors starting from the source up to when you download the binaries. So a lot of things you need to take care of. And we really took care of that, and we are even certificated by that because there was an external security assessment that checked everything at Tamarin, at Adoptium, and the results were great, right? So we did so much, starting from we're providing SBOMs up to we have reproducible builds. So what does that mean? It means when you create on 2 machines a Tamarin build based from the same sources, you can do, why is it not working? You can do a diff between those sources and you won't see a difference, right? And by doing so, you can always verify and validate that your build is fine as long as there's no diff in the binaries. That is great. So let me come more or less to the end and combining all those pieces we've seen so far. So we have the Eclipse platform that is an open IDE. We have Eclipse Tamarin that is an open Java distribution, and we have Jakarta E and MicroProfile that provides standards and frameworks to create Java applications. So what Eclipse has is really everything you need to create solid enterprise Java applications, starting from the IDE over the runtime that is needed up to the frameworks you need to create enterprise. And it's so widely used that you can easily use it in education because there's so much documentation out. It's so safe and secure that you can easily use it in enterprise. And oh yeah, I'm way over time. So let me stop with this one, a last quote from Mike, and I think the first sentence is the most important one. I think the future of Java is solid. I think it too, and I can tell you when talking about Eclipse, I had some other slides, sadly I cannot show it because we're over time. A lot of things happen. There's something new at Eclipse that is called interest groups. So it's like small working groups if companies want to work together on some ideas. And I heard rumors about stuff in the logging area coming up, new stuff in Jakarta E happens in working group, maybe even stuff in the Java build ecosystem. So a lot of things happen, and yeah, at the end, this will be continued, right? Because as I said, a lot of things next to what we have will come in Java at Eclipse. So yeah, I'm 5 minutes over time. So I think we do not have time for questions. I will be here in the room. If you have questions, you can come to me. So I hope you liked that as the start of the day. It was quite fast, so I hope you're now awake. And yeah, if you have questions about any of those projects, you can come to me. Even if I cannot answer it, I know the people who connect you with to know what you want to know about microprofile, Jakarta EE, Adoptium, or whatever. Thank you.